Hi, I'm Astral Dragon from Astral Dragon Gaming, and this is my review of Moonlighters. Moonlighters is a game where you become a shopkeeper of a shop because your grandfather died, and you start diving into these dungeons that have been abandoned for many years. You crawl through the dungeons, collect a whole load of crap, sell that crap, upgrade your gear, then go back in and keep on going until you get to a boss. And you do that for all the different parts of this game, and that's the entire game. It's not much more different than that. It's very simplistic, it's very easy, but it's done well. This was a game that was kickstarted, and there was a lot of kickstarters. The end credits have a huge amount of people. I'm among them. Astral Dragon is quite prominent there under the A's, which is so long. But the two main partners of this particular one are 11-bit Games, who produced the game, and Digital Sun, who actually made the game. They made it on Unity. It's a pixel art game basically, but it is superbly well done. Now the graphics are very simple. The graphics aren't the more complicated sort of pixel art and graphics that you can do. It's a very simple 2D animation, but they are expertly done for all the different pieces. And considering that there are so many monsters, there's so many different things that are constantly hammering at you when you're playing this game, it is a real work of art to just watch this interaction of your sword play or whatever you're using as a weapon, and then have an enemy throw their various attacks at you. The graphical level on this is extremely great, and it just pops every time you watch it, and you just get enchanted by the movement and flow of the characters and all the other monsters and everything. In many respects, and I often will say this about graphic adventures, is that whenever you play a game, if you can't feel the movement or feel how the character moves in animation, like even just standing still, or it breathes or it moves, like the Sonic animations from the original 16-bit games, you're actually connected to that character because of the way they moved, and because they had idle animations, they had set animations, and in this you have a whole lot of different sprites and everything in constant motion, especially when you go to the town and you get all these different adventurers and researchers and everything. They're looking for items, and they're all animated, they're all in motion, and they all have a distinct feel about them. Now, when we come to a lot of the different graphical things, it is very simplistic, but it is expertly done, where you feel the nice flow of different things. And when you come to the big bosses themselves, man, do they feel tough and robust and really flow well. The one thing I will take home as a big thing here is the liquid motion of a lot of the liquidy kind of things that happen in the game. They really look great, and the destruction of the creatures when they die or get hit by you or killed, I love it. It just comes across as a lovely sort of homage to the old school designs, but at the same time it's not hammered home that this is what we're doing, we're copying something. No, they've made something unique, it looks unique, and it feels unique. And that is what it should be when it comes to graphics. Now the sound here is mostly synthesized. There is a lot of individual sounds for Will's sort of knives and bows and everything like that, and they all sound really good. And the monsters sound really good, even though 9 times out of 10 the monsters you won't hear much from them in general. But at the end of the day, it still sounds really good. But the real keynote and the real thing to take home from this game is the music. Each dungeon has its own different music, but not only does each dungeon have its own music, each level of the dungeon has its own type of music as well, which is a really big thing, because it doesn't take away what the first level's music was. No. It adds to it and then grows each time you go up every single level. And that is probably what the most important thing about this is the growth of the character as they move up from level to level. It's not just a whole sort of tiny insurmountable thing here and there. It's this great movement forward of each time you go through a dungeon you feel a different sort of feel for each level, and it feels more ominous, more potent, more presence. And that is what makes this game really good. I love the music for it, for that particular reason. Sound is okay, but the music is really to write home to. I love it, and I'm almost tempted to buy the soundtrack that goes with this. In Moonlighters, you play a shopkeeper that has become a dungeon crawler at the same time. So you're basically tasked with the idea of, oh, I've got to get items, and the only place I can get items is from said dungeon. It's a mysterious dungeon that resets itself, and no one knows what the true purpose of it is. Oh, I'll get in there anyway. And that's what you do. You go in. The first dungeon is very hard in some respects, depending on the difficulty level you choose to dish out to yourself. But the overall sort of feel of it is quite good, because you get this entire feel the whole way through that you feel like you're doing a great job in it. And then you get hammered by a monster and you're dead, and you lose nearly all your stuff, and you start from scratch again. That is where this game kind of sucks, and you have to manage your own avarice before you sort of get hammered by a big nasty and you lose everything. And that's the other really big mechanic of this game, is that you need to manage your inventory skill, because if you don't have enough stuff, you can't buy enough stuff, you can't sell enough stuff, and it's kind of a balancing act between those two things. But at the same time, you've got to try and weave your way through all these dungeons and collect enough stuff. And to collect enough stuff, you have to kill stuff, and you've got to get the right armor and whatnot. The combat in this is a really simplistic design, where dodging is favoured, where using the right tactics or the right weapons against particular enemies, like arrows, are usually good for a long range, but the thing is, it takes times to reload the arrows. You can get a super shot from the arrow, but that takes time to set up, so you gotta wait for the enemy to be in the right position, and so many things. You get a heavy sword, you get a spear, you get all these other things. You even get claws that are for close combat and really hammer into them. But again, you need to find the right particular items for the right characters. I was finding that my two main weapons was a shield and sword, and a bow was the main thing. But at one point, I had to swap out for a stick, or a staff, or a spear or whatnot, in order to get past certain other parts of the game. And that's a whole thing. You get 3 levels of armor. You can get the nice quick armor, you can get the medium armor, or you can get the really heavy armor that's gonna buff you right up, but at the same time slows you down like all hell. So these are the things that you have to sort of wage and balance through the game. And each boss is their own sort of trope of ideas that are very much like the original Zelda games and other dungeon crawlers, where you have to find the pattern in the boss when you come to the end boss, or find the pattern in a particular enemy to go, oh, that's how I defeat it, because there's no other way I'm going to be able to defeat it that way. And that's what you need to do. You need to balance these two things, otherwise the whole thing just flies at you and you're hammered, you're dead. Simple as that. But that is where the game really shines, is that sort of balance between getting enough stuff, being able to defeat enemies, getting back to town, cashing in enough money, and then doing a thing. But the last thing that's really intriguing in this game is the shop idea itself, is that you set the price for the items, and it's not the game or anything like that. You set the price, so you're going to have to judge how valuable something is and how not valuable it is. And they give you a slight guideline in this guidebook that comes with your backpack, but at the same time you've got to use the customers that are coming in to gauge how good or bad you're selling something. So if you're selling something too expensive, then bang, they're not going to buy it, they're just going to flip you. Or if you do sell something that's really expensive, they're going to be very unhappy and they're not going to give you the right amount of money. And then you've got thieves that will come in and try and steal your stuff. And then on top of that, if you don't sell the stuff that the person's asking, you will lose that item. You lose the money. You don't get any cash for it. They just walk out of the store with the item because they're that pissed off with you. A last bit is there's a little bit of a quest system where people will come in. If you upgrade your shop enough, they will come in and request you to go and get particular items. And if you complete those quests, you get a butt ton of money. There's also a bank manager, there's a blacksmith, there's a potion master, there's a guy that sells overpriced stuff but is useful. And then there's the other guy that comes along, and he comes in handy with giving you all the bits and pieces that need to be sort of upgrade your shop and give you little bonuses from customers and whatnot. But overall the gameplay is really addictive and quite enjoyable. So at the end of the day, it all comes down to a real simple verdict on whether this game is good or bad. Most people will look at a lot of games like this and they'll just say, oh yeah, the graphics aren't great, or the idea's not great, or anything like that. And that, I think, is where a lot of indie games are all falling in the wayside. But thanks to a lot of YouTube channels and a lot of different companies like Microsoft now and other companies are backing indie companies and making them into these individual sort of workhorses that are really producing their own thing. Like, we all have to remember, a lot of these places weren't big at the beginning. Like, if you take something like Activision or even Blizzard, they weren't big at the beginning. They were small companies that were tiny little peoples. id was tiny, insurmountably tiny. Now look at it, it's a massive powerhouse. So when they produce one thing, that's it. Everyone looks at it and goes, wow, I want to play that. And that is where looking at the individual games is very important. And probably a lot of the reviews on YouTube are very important for this particular reason. That they can showcase all these different games because all these different people can have an opinion about a game. And this game, I love. I backed it because I looked at the trailer of it and I said, I want it, I need it, I have to have it. And quite a few thousand of other people that are in the listings for the credit said the same thing. This game is punchy, it's quick, it's simple, it's easy to play, it's easy to pick up. You can sink hours into this game just for the shopping system or dungeon crawling to try and find all the items and make sure you've got the whole listing of it. It can be a real collectathon of a game. And that is where a game like this is quite addictive and quite enjoyable. I would hope at some point that the guys that made this, Digital Sun, would look at it and say, okay, we can make a better one, or they might even expand this existing game and give it some more digital content, more dungeons, more places to go, more interaction with the things that are connected to the dungeon, which I'm not going into because you're going to have to finish the game to see that, because that ending is really funny and quite amusing, and it's really enjoyable once you get to that ending. So my basic end review is, it's not a very expensive game, it's quite an enjoyable game, and you're going to get a good 10 to 15 hours minimum of, if you're just going to play it and just churn through it on the easiest setting. But if you're really going to challenge yourself and really work at the game itself, you can quite easily put in a good 20 to 30 hours of time in this kind of a game, where you get that feeling of really succeeding in something. Okay, it's not Dark Souls and it's not anything like that, but at the same time it has that finality of when you lose everything and you have to start all over again. When you can't get enough money and you have to go back to the place that you didn't want to go back to in the first place, and you have to do it all over again. And you have to learn the mechanics, you have to learn how to play the bosses and everything. And that is what truly makes a game, when it makes you learn on its terms and not just gives you a flat out tutorial, this is how you do everything. No, it gives you enough information to tell you how to play the game, and once you start playing the game, everything else is up to you. And that is how a game should be played. That is why games like Stardew Valley and all the other kind of indie games like that have made such a mark. Not because they're helping the player play the game, no, they're giving the player a game and making them work to play the game itself. And that's how it should be. Anyway, this has been my review of Moonlighters. I love the game, I cannot stress that enough. I hope you've enjoyed my review, and I will see you another time. Astral Dragon, out.